Hi, I've updated my VRChat Picture Loader, so I decided I should probably make a new video for it, as quite a lot of things have changed over the past few months, years, since it has been. Yeah, pretty much, you still have the normal downloader as we had before. It just got a bit of a new UI. In general, what my Picture Downloader is basically just a few different scripts that make it very nice to use the VRC image downloader. There are basically three different ways you can set it up. There's this one. This is the first one. Then you have this over here, and then this over there. The first one is pretty simple. You have, or well, not simple. It's the most complicated one of all of them, but it's still simple. You have multiple picture downloaders in your world, and then you have a manager that controls all of these. So, for example, right here it says finish with errors because it's done loading. It says 2 out of 4 have been loaded and that there are 2 errors. So what you can see here is that this one is downloaded and that this one is downloaded, but that these two have not been downloaded as the URL doesn't work or whatever. There are details in the logs if I would open those now, but I don't need that right now. You can just load the pictures again with a button press. And as you can see here, this one switched to loading, but this one doesn't. There are multiple ways you can set up. For example, this one is set up to not store the previous image when loading and to display the loading texture while loading again. And this one is just set up to always display the old image and only switch it to the new one once the new one is done loading. Then we have this one over here. This one doesn't have any controls or nothing. It just downloads the picture on its own without any intervention from any other scripts. It's the simplest one of all of them. It's a light downloader, as it doesn't require any external scripts like the manager or the UI. It just does its thing on its own. Then over here, we have the thing that I just added today. It's the picture downloader URL input. It allows you to just enter a URL that is then being both downloaded for both people, for all people in the instance. It also just uses the light downloader, but adds the picture downloader URL input to it. So you also have all of the same settings that this offers, which I will show you in a second. Yeah, everyone can just enter URL. There are login controls, as you can see, finished, enter new URL. And if I switch to the other client, it says also finished, enter URL. If I switch back and I'll log it, the input is locked down. I can unlock it, switch to the other account, also enter URL. In this case, it won't change anything because it was the same URL. But now it says finished, enter new URL here. And on the other side, it also says that because it's unlocked. But now this account has the login controls, but it's because it's the last one that entered URL. Because normally the person who first joins has the control of it. And if the person decides to unlock it, then the last person who entered a URL will have the control over the downloader, over the input field to be specific. Yeah, let's just go to Unity and see how all of this works. This is the example scene that we have just been in VRChat. As you can see, there are the same things as in the world. We have over here, we have multiple pictures, and we have the picture loader. Each picture has its own script, the picture downloader, where you can provide the URL it should use to download, change texture settings like Mip Maps, web mode, filter mode, Aniso level, etc. And then you also have material settings so that you can set the material the texture should be applied to. If it's left empty, it will just use the one on the game object it's attached to, as also the tooltip says there. Each property has its own tooltip explaining to you what it does. Then you have material properties, which are basically the property of the material that you want to apply the texture to. You can have multiple of these. For example, if you have a material and want to apply the texture to the normal main texture and also to the emission, you can technically just add the emission in here. you want to do that. Then you also have UI raw images. Those are really nice if you want to use it for normal Unity UI. Like this panel over here. If we go to Picture 1 UI, we go down to Canvas and then have the raw image. Exactly the same script, but instead of a mesh being here, we have this raw image, and it will also just attach the image to the raw image. You can have as many raw images as you want to. And as it said before, if you hover over it, it gives you a bit of information. In this case, it also says that it tries to use the one it's attached to, if none is provided. The light downloader, which we have over here, is pretty much the same thing, but without the manager. And what the manager does is it basically just controls when the images should be loaded and shows you how many images have been loaded, etc. So you can load on start, which will load the image when you join the world, auto reload them after a set amount of time, like after 10 minutes or whatever. You can have the manual load button, and you can also disable the UI if you don't want the UI. Then, as I said before, we have the light downloader, and it is exactly the same thing, but instead of having a manager, all of that stuff is also in the downloader itself. This is nice when you just have a single image that you want to download or don't feel the need to have the manager, don't want the UI or whatever. There's all the same things, but it just has the UL, has the load and start options, and the auto reload stuff included in the script itself. Same thing goes for the UL input downloader, because it also just uses a normal light downloader. And the special thing about it is that you have the picture loader URL input. This script is what is actually controlling the whole UI part and syncing it over the network. How it works is you basically just set up the normal downloader as you also did before, the light downloader. And then you just drag in the picture loader URL input prefab and tell it which downloader to use. In this case, you would just tell it to use the ROM. There you have just the control if it should be locked by default or not. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. It works as you would expect with being able to enter URL and loading it. It also supports all of the error and loading textures. This is something that is pretty nice about my image downloader. You have these loading and error texture, and you can set a texture that should be used while the image is downloading. You can also set a texture that should be displayed if there's an error and you couldn't download the picture. You can also just tell, hey, if I'm reloading the picture, so if I'm entering, if I go over here in VRChat again, and we look over here, this image, if I click load, it won't disappear like the other one. It will stay there because we have checked the, or unchecked, wait, I'm not sure. Yeah, we have checked the skip loading texture on reload. That would just keep the old texture while still loading the new one, and then just get rid of the old texture once the new one is finished. It makes it so that when you use auto reload, for example, you won't have any periods where there will be a loading texture while you have been in the instance already for like 10 minutes. Yeah, this is my picture download. You can find the download link in the description. There's also a lot of documentation that explains on how to set it up. I really recommend you to just take a look at the example scene, as it describes pretty much everything you need to do, and it shows it, not describes it, but yeah. Yeah, that's it.